The crystal spires of the Galactic Council headquarters pierced the purple sky of Nexus Prime like frozen lightning. Within the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in their floating platforms, each delegation more magnificent than the last. The Zephyrian nobles wore robes that shimmered with captured starlight, while the insectoid hive-mind queens clicked their mandibles in complex harmonies that served as their language. At the center of it all sat Princess Zalara of the Ethereal Dominion, her crystalline skin catching the ambient light and throwing it back in dazzling patterns. She was arguably the most powerful individual in the known galaxy, heir to an empire that spanned 3 spiral arms and commanded fleets that could crack planets. Her very presence made the air hum with barely contained energy, and even the most seasoned diplomats found themselves speaking in hushed tones when she was near. The topic of today's assembly was the ongoing crisis in the Outer Rim territories, where the savage war clans have been raiding peaceful settlements for months. These primitive beings lived in massive fleets of cobbled-together ships, following ancient tribal customs that seemed to revolve entirely around violence and conquest. They recognized no authority, respected no treaties, and had laughed at every diplomatic overture the Council had made. The solution is obvious. Princess Zalara's voice rang out across the assembly, each word carrying the authority of someone who had never been denied anything in her 3-century lifespan. We mobilized the combined fleet and crush these barbarians once and for all. They understand only strength, so we show them what real power looks like. Murmurs of agreement rippled through many of the delegations. The princess was known for her direct approach to problems, and her military record was impressive. She had personally led campaigns that had brought 12 worlds into the Dominion's embrace, and her tactical brilliance was legendary among the warrior castes. But then, from the smallest and most modest platform in the entire assembly, came a quiet voice that somehow carried clearly through the vast space. With respect, Your Highness, perhaps there might be another way. The entire assembly fell silent. Every eye, sensor, and detection apparatus turned toward the source of the voice. On the humble platform reserved for minor species sat a single figure in a plain brown robe. He was tall and lean, with short-cropped hair and unremarkable features that seemed almost aggressively ordinary compared to the exotic beauty and alien majesty surrounding him. Princess Zalara's perfect features twisted into an expression of amused disdain. "And who might you be to question my judgment, little man?" The figure stood slowly, pulling back his hood to reveal a completely ordinary human face. "I am Marcus Chun, representing the Terran Republic." A wave of barely suppressed laughter swept through the assembly. The Terran Republic was a joke among the galactic community. Humans were newcomers, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last few decades. Their territory consisted of exactly one star system, and their entire population wouldn't fill a single district of most civilized worlds. They had been granted a seat on the council more out of curiosity than respect, a way for the great powers to observe these strange little mammals who seemed determined to punch above their weight class. The apprentice species wishes to lecture us on warfare. Princess Zalara's laugh was like crystal bells ringing. "Tell me, little human, how many fleets does your republic command? How many worlds bow to your authority?" Marcus remained standing, his posture relaxed but alert. "We have 4 ships, Your Highness. And as for worlds that bow to our authority, well, we've never really been interested in making others bow." The laughter that erupted from the assembly was deafening. Even the normally stoic crystalline collective's representatives began to resonate at frequencies that indicated extreme amusement. The idea that a species with 4 ships could contribute anything meaningful to a discussion about the war clans was absurd. Princess Zalara wiped an elegant tear from her eye. 4 ships. How precious. And with this mighty armada, you think you can succeed where the combined fleet of 1,000 worlds has failed. "I think," Marcus said calmly, that we might be able to talk to them. This time the silence was different. It wasn't the respectful quiet of a listening assembly, but the stunned hush that follows when someone says something so profoundly stupid that it takes a moment for minds to process it. Ambassador Kretak of the militant Concordat rose on his platform, his scarred carapace gleaming under the lights. He was a veteran of 100 battles, and the very sight of him made lesser beings step back instinctively. "Human," he growled, his voice like grinding stone, "the war clans have killed every diplomat we've sent. They respond to peaceful overtures by broadcasting the screams of our ambassadors across subspace. They are animals." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I understand your frustration, Ambassador. But perhaps the problem isn't that they're animals. Perhaps the problem is that we've been trying to talk to them like they're civilized." Princess Zalara leaned forward, her interest suddenly genuine. There was something about the human's tone that suggested he wasn't quite as naive as he appeared. "Explain." "The war clans follow the old ways," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the assembly hall. "Honor, strength, personal combat. When we send the messages through diplomatic channels, we're essentially telling them that we're too weak to face them directly. When we offer them treaties and trade agreements, we're saying that we value comfort over courage. From their perspective, we're not potential allies or even worthy enemies. We're prey." High Counselor Vexali of the Ethereal Dominion floated down from her position near Princess Zalara's platform. She was ancient even by the standards of her long-lived species, and her wisdom was legendary. "You speak as if you understand their culture, human. But they're savages who live in ships held together with molecular tape and powered by reactors that should have exploded decades ago. What could such creatures possibly teach us about honor?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and something in his stillness made the assembly hall feel suddenly smaller. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Your Excellency, may I tell you about my species?" The princess waved a dismissive hand. "Enlighten us about your glorious heritage, apprentice." "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day." Marcus began, his tone conversational despite the gravity of his words. "We had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. We were slower than most predators, weaker than most prey. By all rights, we should have been extinct within a few thousand years of climbing down from the trees." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. There was something unsettling about the human's casual tone as he described his species' apparent weakness. "But we had one advantage," Marcus continued. "We were too stupid to know when we were beaten. When the ice ages came and drove every other species to extinction, we just adapted. We learned to make fire, to craft tools, to work together in groups. When we ran out of large game to hunt, we learned agriculture. When we ran out of room to expand, we learned to sail across oceans that terrified us." Ambassador Kretak made a dismissive clicking sound. "Survival adaptation is common among primitive species. It hardly makes you unique." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since he'd begun speaking, that expression didn't look entirely friendly. "You're right, Ambassador. Lots of species adapt to survive. But here's the thing about humans. We don't just adapt to our environment. We adapt our environment to us." High Counselor Vexali's expression grew thoughtful. "What do you mean?" "We looked at oceans and decided they were roadways. We looked at deserts and decided they were gardens waiting for water. We looked at mountains and decided they were inconveniently placed. We looked at the sky and decided we belonged there." Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. "And when we finally reached the stars and met all of you, we looked at the galaxy and decided we'd like to be friends." Princess Zalara laughed, but it sounded forced now. Very poetic, little human. "But poetry won't stop war clan raiders from burning settlements." "No," Marcus agreed, "but understanding might." He gestured toward the holographic display that dominated the center of the assembly hall, where tactical data about recent war clan attacks scrolled past in neat, orderly patterns. Look at their raids. Really look at them. They're not random acts of savagery. There's a pattern. Ambassador Kretak studied the display, his tactical mind automatically analyzing the data. They target lightly defended settlements. Standard raider behavior. Look closer, Marcus said. They target lightly defended settlements with specific characteristics. Mining colonies, agricultural worlds, research stations. But never military installations, even when they're more isolated and apparently vulnerable. High Counselor Vexali's eyes narrowed. You think they're avoiding military targets? I think they're being careful not to start a war they can't win, Marcus replied. The war clans aren't stupid, Your Excellency. Primitive, maybe, but not stupid. They know exactly how outgunned they are. So they're taking what they need to survive while being very careful not to cross any lines that would unite the galaxy against them. Princess Zalara stood abruptly, her crystalline features hard as diamond. Are you suggesting that we negotiate with terrorists? I'm suggesting that we try to understand why they're doing this, Marcus said calmly. Pirates raid for profit. Conquerors raid for territory. But the war clans aren't keeping what they take. They grab supplies, provisions, sometimes people, and then they disappear back into deep space. That's not the behavior of criminals. That's the behavior of refugees. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Refugees. The very idea that the terrifying war clans might be anything other than savage monsters seemed to offend the sensibilities of every civilized being in the assembly. Refugees from what? Princess Zalara demanded. The Outer Rim has been mapped. There are no threats out there that could drive the war clans from their home territories. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was very soft. Your Highness, when was the last time anyone actually went out there to look? The question struck like a physical blow. The princess's perfect composure cracked slightly, and several delegates began checking their data tablets with sudden urgency. Ambassador Kretak's voice was grim. The last comprehensive survey of the Outer Rim was conducted 67 years ago by the Exploration Corps. And what did they find? Marcus asked. Nothing of strategic value. Empty systems, dead worlds, scattered asteroid fields. The ambassador paused. The war clans were already nomadic at that time, living in their fleets, following migration patterns through the void. 67 years. Marcus repeated thoughtfully. A lot can change in 67 years. High Counselor Vexali gestured sharply, and the holographic display shifted to show star charts of the Outer Rim. The vast region was marked with outdated survey data and large sections labeled as unexplored or no significant resources detected. You're suggesting that something has happened in the Outer Rim that we don't know about, she said slowly. Something that has driven the war clans from their traditional territories. I'm suggesting that maybe we should find out, Marcus replied, before we send the combined fleet to exterminate what might be the last survivors of a catastrophe we don't even know happened. Princess Zalara's laugh was sharp and bitter. And I suppose you think your 4 ships are adequate for such a mission? Marcus met her gaze steadily. I think my 4 ships are small enough to approach the war clans without being seen as a threat. And if something did happen in the Outer Rim, something bad enough to drive an entire civilization into nomadic raiding, then maybe we need to know about it before it happens to someone else. The assembly hall erupted in heated discussion as delegates conferred with their advisors and checked their databases. The human had raised uncomfortable questions, but his logic was difficult to refute. Princess Zalara stood in the center of it all, her crystalline features reflecting the chaos around her like a fractured mirror. The apprentice species had dared to question her judgment, and, worse, he had done it in front of the entire galactic community. Her pride demanded satisfaction. Very well, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. You wish to play diplomat with savages? You have my permission to try. Her smile was coldly beautiful. When the war clans broadcast your screams across the galaxy, perhaps it will teach your species the price of arrogance. Marcus bowed formally. Your Highness is most gracious. As he turned to leave the assembly, Princess Zalara called out one last time. Tell me, little human, What makes you think the war clans will even listen to you? What do you possibly have to offer that they would want? Marcus paused at the edge of his platform, his hand resting on the simple brown robe that marked him as the representative of humanity's tiny republic. When he looked back, his eyes held something that made even the princess step back slightly. "Understanding," he said quietly. "And if that doesn't work, we'll try something we're very good at." "Which is?" Marcus smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely friendly, which somehow made it infinitely more unsettling. "Making friends with people everyone else thinks are monsters." As the human left the assembly hall, Princess Zalara found herself staring after him with an expression she couldn't quite identify. Around her, the greatest minds in the galaxy continued their heated discussions about military strategies and diplomatic protocols, but she was no longer listening. The apprentice had challenged her in front of the entire council, and protocol demanded that she respond with overwhelming force. But something about his quiet confidence nagged at her. Humans were newcomers, barely worthy of notice by galactic standards. They had no advanced technology, no vast fleets, no ancient wisdom. But they also had no fear. She had seen it in his eyes when he spoke about his species' history. There had been pride there, yes, but also something else. A kind of cheerful madness that suggested humans might actually be insane enough to try talking to the war clans. And if they succeeded where the combined might of galactic civilization had failed. Princess Zalara pushed the thought away. The human would die, probably within days of entering Warclan territory. His 4 ships would be scattered wreckage drifting through the void, and his naive idealism would be just another footnote in the long history of species that had overestimated their own importance. But as she prepared to address the assembly about mobilizing the combined fleet, she found herself wondering what the human had meant about making friends with monsters. And, despite herself, she was curious enough to want to find out. 3 days later, 4 unremarkable human ships departed from Nexus Prime and headed toward the Outer Rim. They carried no great weapons, no advanced shields, no revolutionary technology. They were crewed by humans who had volunteered for what everyone assumed was a suicide mission, led by a diplomat who thought he could succeed where the greatest minds in the galaxy had failed. Princess Zalara watched them go from her private observatory, her crystalline fingers tracing patterns on the viewport as the tiny ships disappeared into hyperspace. She told herself she was watching to mark the moment when the apprentice species learned their place in the galactic order. But deep down, in a part of her mind she rarely acknowledged, she found herself hoping that the strange little human might actually prove her wrong. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed behind the human fleet with a flash of exotic radiation, leaving 4 small ships drifting in the empty darkness between stars. They were deep in the Outer Rim now, far from the shipping lanes and patrol routes that marked civilized space. Here, the only law was survival, and the only authority belonged to whoever had the biggest guns and the will to use them. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the TRSS Endeavour, studying the tactical display with practiced eyes. She was a veteran of the border wars, the conflicts that had raged when humanity first encountered aggressive alien species, and her scarred hands rested easily on the command console. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements economical and precise. "Passive sensors are picking up debris signatures," reported Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka from the sensor station. "Looks like ship fragments scattered across several light hours. Some of it's recent." Marcus Chun moved to stand beside the captain, his diplomat's robes looking oddly out of place on the military bridge. "Recent? How recent?" "Within the last few weeks," Tanaka replied, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "The dispersion patterns suggest a battle. A big one." Captain Mitchell nodded grimly. "Any signatures we can identify?" "Some pieces match Galactic Council ship designs. Others," Tanaka frowned at her readings. "Others are completely unknown. The material composition is strange. Looks like a mix of standard starship alloys and something else. Something organic." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Organic ship components? "That's not possible," said Commander Rodriguez from the communication station. "No known species builds ships with organic components. The structural integrity wouldn't hold up to space travel." "No known civilized species," Captain Mitchell corrected quietly. "But out here, who knows what we might find?" She activated the ship's intercom. "All stations, this is the captain. We're entering potentially hostile territory. Combat protocols are now in effect. Engineering. I want our engines ready for emergency jump at a moment's notice. Weapons. Charge the particle banks, but keep them powered down. I don't want to look threatening unless we have to." Marcus appreciated the captain's caution. The 4 ships of the human fleet were not built for war. The Endeavor and her sister ships were exploration vessels, converted for long-range missions with minimal armament. They carried enough firepower to defend themselves against pirates or raiders, but against a real military force, they would last about as long as paper airplanes in a hurricane. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 15, Tanaka announced suddenly. "Multiple ships, big ones, moving in our direction." Captain Mitchell's voice was calm as ice. "How big?" "Dreadnought class, at least. I'm counting 12, no, 15 separate contacts. They're not broadcasting any identification signals." Marcus moved to the forward viewport and stared into the darkness. He couldn't see anything yet, but he knew they were out there. The war clans, the savage nomads who had terrorized the Outer Rim for months. And now they were coming to investigate the humans' arrival. "Captain," he said quietly, "I need to make a request." "Go ahead. When they get here, let me talk to them first." Captain Mitchell looked at him as if he'd suggested juggling live grenades. "Mr. Chun, these people kill diplomats for sport." "They kill council diplomats," Marcus corrected, "because council diplomats approach them from a position of assumed superiority. I want to try something different." "Such as?" Marcus smiled grimly. "I want to try approaching them from a position of complete honesty." Before Captain Mitchell could respond, the darkness outside began to change. Shapes moved against the stars, vast and threatening. The WarClan fleet was emerging from the void like predators rising from deep water. "Jesus Christ," whispered someone on the bridge. The WarClan ships defied every principle of civilized starship design. They were massive, crude things that looked like they had been cobbled together from the wreckage of a dozen different vessels. Armor plating hung at odd angles, weapon mounts sprouted from seemingly random locations, and the whole assemblage was held together with what appeared to be a combination of welding, prayer, and sheer bloody-mindedness. But they were clearly functional. Energy readings showed that each ship carried enough firepower to level a small moon, and their approach formation spoke of tactical competence despite their ramshackle appearance. "Incoming transmission," Rodriguez reported. "It's aggressive." "Put on speakers," Captain Mitchell ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was rough as grinding stone and twice as hostile. It spoke in heavily accented standard, but the meaning was clear enough. "Unknown vessels. You trespass in WarClan territory. Surrender your ships or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to respond." Marcus stepped forward. "Open a channel." Captain Mitchell nodded to Rodriguez, who activated the communications array. "WarClan fleet," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the void. "This is Marcus Chun of the Terran Republic. We come seeking parley." The response was immediate and predictably violent. "Terran Republic means nothing to us. Surrender or die." "We choose neither," Marcus replied calmly. "We choose to talk." There was a long silence. Then the voice returned, and this time there was a note of puzzlement mixed with the aggression. "You refuse surrender? Then you choose battle?" "We choose conversation," Marcus said. "My ship is unarmed for combat. My fleet carries no weapons capable of threatening your vessels. We came here to speak with you about matters of mutual interest." Another silence, longer this time. Captain Mitchell watched the tactical display with growing tension as the WarClan ships continued their approach. They would be in weapons range within minutes. When the voice returned, it was different. Still rough, still hostile, but now carrying a note of genuine curiosity. What matters could soft council dogs share with the clans? We are not of the council, Marcus replied. We are human, and we think you might be in trouble. This time the silence stretched for nearly a full minute. When it broke, it was with the sound of harsh laughter. Trouble? The clans know no fear of soft-flesh creatures who build ships like toys. Marcus smiled, though the war clan commander couldn't see it. Honored warrior, my species has a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight that matters, but the size of the fight in the dog. Your words are riddles. Speak plain. I speak of courage, Marcus said simply. Your people have survived in the void for generations, building ships from scrap and making homes among the stars. That takes courage. But running from your ancestral territories into contested space, raiding for supplies instead of settling on worlds of your own, that also takes courage. The question is, what are you running from? The silence that followed was different from the others. It was the silence of someone who had been asked a question they didn't want to answer. Captain Mitchell leaned close to Marcus. They're still approaching. If this goes badly, it won't, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. They're talking instead of shooting. That's progress. The WarClan voice returned, colder now. You know nothing of our ways, soft flesh. We take what we need because we are strong enough to take it. This is the law of the void. The law of the desperate, Marcus countered. Strong people don't need to raid supply convoys. They build their own supplies. Proud people don't flee their homes. They defend them. You dare question our courage? The voice was rising now, rage building like a thunderstorm. I question your circumstances, Marcus said calmly. A truly strong people would face their enemies head-on instead of sneaking around the edges of civilized space, taking scraps like beggars. Lieutenant Commander Tanaka looked up from her console with alarm. Sir, they're charging weapons. Captain Mitchell started to move toward the weapons console, but Marcus held up a hand. Wait, he said quietly. Then, louder, into the communicator, prove me wrong. What did you say? Prove me wrong, Marcus repeated. Face us ship to ship, warrior to warrior. Show us the courage of the war clans instead of hiding behind threats and superior numbers. Captain Mitchell stared at him in horror. Marcus, what are you doing? Something insane, he admitted, but maybe insane enough to work. The war clan response came after a moment that felt like an eternity. You challenge the clans to single combat? I challenge your greatest warrior to meet our greatest warrior, Marcus said. Ship against ship, skill against skill. If you win, you take our ships as prizes. If we win, you listen to what we have to say. And if we refuse, Marcus's voice hardened. Then you prove that the mighty war clans are too afraid to face 4 human ships in honest battle. The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Around the bridge, the crew watched their instruments with white-knuckled tension. Then the voice returned, and this time it was filled with something that might have been amusement. You are either very brave or very stupid, soft flesh. Probably both, Marcus admitted. Do you accept? I accept. But know this, when our champion crushes your toy ship, your death will be slow. If your champion wins, Marcus said, I'll die honored to have faced true warriors. He cut the transmission and turned to face Captain Mitchell's incredulous stare. Explain to me, she said very quietly, how getting us all killed serves the cause of diplomacy. Marcus moved to the tactical display, studying the formations of WarClan ships, because they accepted the challenge instead of just destroying us outright. That tells us something important about their psychology. That they like to play with their food? That they still follow the old warrior codes, Marcus corrected. Honor, personal combat, respect for courage. If they were just savage raiders, they would have opened fire the moment we refused to surrender. But they didn't. They're following rules, Captain. And if they follow rules, we can work with them. Commander Rodriguez looked up from his station. Sir, one of their ships is separating from the main fleet. It's big. On the tactical display, a new contact appeared. It was larger than the Endeavor by a factor of 3, and sensor readings showed armor plating thick enough to stop small asteroids. Weapon ports dotted its hull like the eyes of some vast predator. "That's their champion," Captain Mitchell said grimly. "What's our plan?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the approaching ship. Then he smiled that same unsettling smile he had used in the council assembly. "Our plan is to show them what humans do when everyone thinks we're going to lose." He activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is Marcus Chun. In approximately 10 minutes, we're going to engage in single combat with a WarClan battlecruiser. I know this sounds like suicide, and statistically speaking, it probably is, but I want you all to know that you're fighting for more than just our lives. You're fighting for the chance to prevent a war that could consume the galaxy." He paused, looking around at the faces of the bridge crew. They were scared, but they were also determined. They were human, which meant they were too stubborn to quit even when defeat was certain. "The enemy ship is bigger than us, stronger than us, and probably better armed," Marcus continued. "But they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of when our backs are against the wall. So let's show them." Captain Mitchell took her position at the command console. "All stations report ready for combat. Engineering standing by. Weapons online and charged. Navigation ready for evasive maneuvers. Communications maintaining open channels." As the WarClan ship approached, details became visible through the viewport. It was even more intimidating up close, its patchwork hull scarred by countless battles. But Marcus noticed something interesting about its approach vector. "Captain," he said quietly, "they're not trying to maximize their firing solutions." Captain Mitchell studied the tactical display. "You're right. They're coming straight at us. No attempt at tactical maneuvering. Because this isn't a naval battle to them," Marcus realized. "It's a duel. They're treating this like a personal combat between individual warriors. That's good for us. That's very good for us," Marcus said with growing excitement. "Because if they're thinking like individual fighters instead of fleet commanders, we can use their expectations against them." The WarClan ship was close enough now that they could see details of its construction. It had been built for intimidation as much as function, with spikes and blade-like protrusions that served no tactical purpose except to look terrifying. "Incoming transmission," Rodriguez announced. "Put it through." A new voice came over the speakers, deeper and rougher than the fleet commander's. "I am Garoth the Bloodhand, champion of the Ironjaw clan. Your death will be glorious, soft flesh." Marcus activated the communicator. "I am Marcus Chun, and I represent the human species. Your reputation precedes you, Garoth the Bloodhand. You know of me? I know that anyone who survives long enough to become champion of a war clan must be a warrior of exceptional skill," Marcus said diplomatically. "It will be an honor to face you in combat." There was a pause, and when Garoth spoke again, his tone was slightly different. "You speak with respect. This is unusual. Respect is earned through courage and skill," Marcus replied, "both of which you have demonstrated by accepting this challenge." Another pause. Then, "You are not what I expected from council races." "We are not a council race," Marcus said. "We are something else entirely." "Show me," Garoth growled. The WarClan ship accelerated suddenly, closing the distance between them with surprising speed for something so massive. Energy readings spiked as its weapons came online. "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Mitchell ordered. "All power to forward shields." The Endeavor rolled and dove its smaller size, giving it an advantage in maneuverability. Particle beams lanced through the space where they had been moments before, their passage marking the beginning of a battle that would determine the fate of both species. But as the first shots were exchanged, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Not fear for his life or anxiety about the mission, but a strange sense of recognition. The WarClan champion fought with skill and honor, following rules that valued courage over mere efficiency. They reminded him, in fact, of humans. And as the battle began in earnest, Marcus started to understand exactly why the WarClans had accepted a challenge. They weren't savages pretending to be warriors. They were warriors pretending to be savages, because savagery was the only thing that kept them alive in a galaxy that had no place for their kind of honor. The question was whether humanity could show them there was another way the space between the two ships erupted in fire and lightning as weapon systems engaged at point-blank range. The TRSS Endeavour rolled desperately to port as massive plasma bolts scorched past her hull, their passage leaving glowing trails in the void. Garotha's ship, the Bloodfang, pursued with relentless efficiency, its crude but effective weapons systems tracking the smaller human vessel with frightening accuracy. Shields down to 60%, reported Lieutenant Commander Tanaka, her voice steady despite the violent shaking as another near-miss sent shockwaves through the ship's structure. Hull integrity holding, but we can't take many more hits like that. Captain Mitchell gripped her command chair as the Endeavour executed another desperate evasive maneuver. Return fire. Target their weapon mounts. The human ship's particle cannons spoke in reply, their focused beams striking the Bloodfang's heavily armored hull. The shots were precise, aimed not for maximum damage, but for specific systems. Sparks flew from one of the WarClan ship's gun ports as the targeting array was destroyed. Through the communications channel, they could hear Garotha's approval. Good. You fight with skill, not just desperation. But skill alone will not save you. The Bloodfang changed tactics suddenly, no longer pursuing in a straight line, but beginning to circle the Endeavour like a predator stalking wounded prey. Its weapons fire became more methodical, probing for weaknesses in the human ship's defenses. Marcus watched the tactical display with growing understanding. He's not trying to destroy us quickly, he said to Captain Mitchell. He's testing us. Testing us for what? Worthiness, Marcus replied. This isn't just a battle to him. It's a trial by combat. The realization changed everything. If this was a test of worthiness rather than a simple fight to the death, then the rules were different. The WarClans valued courage, honor, and tactical innovation. Simply running or fighting defensively wouldn't be enough to earn their respect. Captain, Marcus said urgently, we need to go on the offensive. Captain Mitchell looked at him as if he'd suggested they ram the enemy ship. Marcus, that thing has 3 times our firepower and armor that could stop a meteor. Offensive action is suicide. Defensive action is slow suicide, Marcus countered. If we're going to die, let's die in a way that means something to them. Another volley of plasma fire bracketed the Endeavour, close enough that the heat bloom registered on their sensors. The Bloodfang was closing in, its circle tightening like a noose. Engineering, Captain Mitchell called out. How much power can you give me? Commander Sarakim's voice came back crackling with static. I can give you everything, Captain, but only for a short burst. Maybe 3 minutes at maximum output before we risk core breach. That'll have to do. Captain Mitchell turned to the weapons officer. Mr. Okafor, prepare all forward batteries for concentrated fire. I want everything we have focused on a single point. Aye, Captain. Target selection. Marcus studied the tactical display, looking for patterns in the Bloodfang's movement. The WarClan ship was massive and powerful, but its very size made it predictable. And there, in the way it turned, he saw the opening they needed. Their starboard weapons cluster, he said. They have a blind spot there, about 30 degrees off their stern quarter. If we can get inside their turning radius, we'd be sitting on top of their main guns, Captain Mitchell finished. For about 10 seconds, Marcus agreed. But those might be the most important 10 seconds in galactic history. The captain was quiet for a moment, considering. Around them, the bridge crew continued their work with professional calm, despite the fact that they were all probably going to die in the next few minutes. Mr. Rodriguez, she said finally, open a channel to the Bloodfang. Channel open, Captain. Marcus stepped forward. Garoth the Bloodhand, you are a worthy opponent. But we have shown you only defense and evasion. Would you see what happens when humans attack? The response came immediately, filled with anticipation. Show me soft flesh. Show me the fury of your species. Marcus nodded to Captain Mitchell. All power to engines. Take us in. The Endeavour's fusion drive flared to maximum output, pushing the ship forward with acceleration that pressed everyone against their stations. They dove toward the Bloodfang at an angle that seemed suicidal, aiming for the space just ahead of the massive ship's projected position. Garoth sees what we're doing, Tanaka reported. He's turning to bring his main guns to bear. He's too late, Captain Mitchell said with grim satisfaction. Mr. Okafor, fire everything. At point-blank range, with no shields or armor between them, and their target, the Endeavor unleashed everything in her arsenal. Particle beams, plasma bolts, and kinetic projectiles hammered into the Bloodfang's starboard weapons cluster in a concentrated fury that would have vaporized a civilian vessel. The WarClan ship's crude armor held, but barely. Weapon mounts exploded in showers of sparks and molten metal. One of the main plasma cannons went dark, its power couplings severed. For a moment, the Bloodfang was genuinely crippled on one side. But Garoth was far from finished. The massive ship rolled with surprising agility, bringing undamaged weapons to bear. The return volley caught the Endeavor at nearly point-blank range, overwhelming her shields and scoring deep gouges in her hull. Hull breach on Deck 7. Damage control reported. Emergency bulkheads holding, but we've lost 2 compartments. Engines are running hot, engineering added. We can't maintain this power level much longer. Marcus activated the communicator again. Impressive, Garoth. But we're not done yet. Nor am I human. You fight with the heart of a true warrior, but your ship is small and weak. Submit, and I will grant you an honorable death. Counterproposal, Marcus said. Let's finish this properly. Speak. Marcus looked at Captain Mitchell, who nodded grimly. Single pass, maximum velocity, all weapons. Winner takes all. There was a long pause. Then, Garotha's laughter boomed across the communications channel. You are insane, soft flesh. I accept. Both ships backed away from each other, creating space for their final approach. The Bloodfang's engines glowed like angry stars as it prepared for its attack run, while the Endeavor's smaller drive flared with desperate intensity. This is it, Captain Mitchell announced to her crew. Whatever happens in the next 30 seconds, I want you all to know it's been an honor serving with you. The 2 ships accelerated toward each other on a collision course, their relative velocity climbing to dangerous levels. At this speed, any hit would be devastating, possibly fatal to both vessels. Weapons locked and ready, Okafor reported. Engines at maximum burn, Kim added from engineering. All hands brace for impact, Captain Mitchell ordered. The ships closed the distance with terrifying speed. 20 kilometers. 10. 5. At the last possible moment, both vessels opened fire. Space erupted in a storm of energy and destruction. The Endeavor's concentrated fire struck the Bloodfang amidships, penetrating deep into the larger ship's structure. At the same time, the WarClan vessel's return volley hammered the human ship from bow to stern. The Endeavor's hull buckled under the impact. Systems overloaded throughout the ship as energy cascaded through her structure. But her desperate attack had found its mark. The Bloodfang's main reactor containment field flickered, and, for a terrifying moment, it seemed like the massive ship might suffer a core breach. Both vessels flew past each other and began to coast, their engines offline and their weapons temporarily depleted. Emergency lights flickered on damaged bridges as both crews struggled to assess the damage. Report, Captain Mitchell gasped, pulling herself upright from where the impact had thrown her. Engines offline, Kim reported, her voice strained. Main power at 15%. We're running on backup systems. Weapons. Particle cannons destroyed. We've got maybe 1 torpedo left, but no way to target it effectively. Marcus activated the communicator with trembling hands. Garoth, are you still there? For a long moment, there was no response. Then, the WarClan champion's voice came through the static, and it was filled with something that might have been respect. I am here, human. My ship is crippled, my weapons destroyed. But I still live. As do we, Marcus replied. It seems we are evenly matched. No, Garoth said firmly. You are the victor. Marcus blinked in surprise. I don't understand. Your ship is smaller, weaker, crewed by a species barely out of its home system, Garoth explained. Yet you faced me in honest combat and fought me to a standstill. In the eyes of the clans, you have proven your worth as warriors. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the Bloodfang drifting nearby, its hull scarred and blackened but still intact. It was a fearsome sight, but no longer actively threatening. "Does this mean you'll listen to what we have to say?" Marcus asked. "It means I will take you before the clan chiefs," Garoth replied. "What you say to them is between you and the ancestors." Captain Mitchell looked at Marcus with a mixture of admiration and exasperation. "You realize we just fought a battle we had no chance of winning, against an enemy we're supposed to be negotiating with. And it worked," Marcus pointed out. "They respect us now. They respect us enough not to kill us immediately," she corrected. "That's progress, I suppose." Repair shuttles began launching from both ships, their crews working together to patch the most critical damage. It was a surreal sight, human and WarClan engineers collaborating to repair the very weapons they had been using to try to kill each other minutes before. As the immediate crisis passed, Marcus found himself thinking about Princess Zalara's mocking words back on Nexus Prime. She had called him an apprentice, dismissed humanity as irrelevant. But the apprentice had just earned the respect of the most feared warriors in the galaxy through courage and determination rather than overwhelming firepower. "Mr. Chun," Tanaka called from her sensor station, "I'm picking up movement from the main WarClan fleet. They're approaching our position." Marcus felt a chill. If the other WarClan ships decided that Garoth's defeat required vengeance, the disabled human vessels would be helpless. "Garoth," he said into the communicator, "your fleet is approaching. What are their intentions?" "They come to witness," the WarClan champion replied. "Word of our battle has spread throughout the fleet. Many wish to see the humans who fought like true warriors." "That's good." "It is very good, soft flesh. The clans respect strength, but they honor courage above all else. You have shown both." As the massive WarClan ships surrounded the battered human vessels, Marcus began to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. They had not just won a battle. They had earned entrance to a culture that had been closed to outsiders for generations. But the real test was still ahead. If the WarClans were truly refugees from some unknown catastrophe, then stopping their raids would require more than military victory. It would require understanding their plight and finding a solution that honored their warrior traditions while protecting the innocent. "Captain," Marcus said quietly, "I think we're about to discover what's really happening in the Outer Rim." Captain Mitchell nodded, watching as the first WarClan shuttle approached their ship. "Whatever it is, at least now they'll tell us about it instead of shooting us for asking." As the shuttle docked and the first WarClan warriors prepared to come aboard, Marcus felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. They had passed the first test, but the hardest part of their mission was just beginning. And somewhere in the depths of space, in regions no civilized ship had visited for decades, something waited in the darkness. Something that had driven an entire warrior culture from their homes and turned them into desperate raiders. Marcus could only hope that when they learned the truth, humanity would be strong enough to help them face it. The WarClan shuttle was a brutal thing, all angles and armor plating, but it docked with the Endeavor with surprising gentleness. Marcus stood in the airlock chamber with Captain Mitchell and 2 security officers, waiting as the alien vessel's systems interfaced with their own. The sound of massive mechanical locks engaging echoed through the hull like the closing of a prison door. When the airlock finally cycled open, the first thing that hit them was the smell. It was a mixture of machine oil, recycled air, and something else, something organic and slightly acidic that made Marcus's nose wrinkle involuntarily. The first figure to emerge from the shuttle was massive, easily 7 feet tall, and built like a walking fortress. His skin was the color of old copper, crossed with ritual scars that formed intricate patterns across his arms and face. He wore armor that looked like it had been forged from the hull plates of destroyed starships, and his eyes glowed with a faint inner light that suggested extensive cybernetic modification. This was Garoth the Bloodhand, champion of the Ironjaw clan, and he moved with the careful precision of a predator in an unfamiliar environment. Behind him came two other warriors, smaller, but no less intimidating. One was a female with elaborate bone ornaments woven into her hair and brands covering half her face. The other was younger, barely out of adolescence by human standards, but already bearing the scars of multiple battles. Garoth stopped just inside the airlock and performed what Marcus recognized as a formal bow, though it was unlike any diplomatic gesture he had ever seen. The Warclan champion placed his right fist over his heart and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "I greet you, Marcus Chun of the humans, in the name of the Ironjaw clan and by the authority of the ancestor spirits. You have proven yourself in combat and earned the right to speak." Marcus returned the bow as best he could, mimicking the gesture. "I greet you, Garoth the Bloodhand, in the name of the Terran Republic and by the authority of our elected leaders. I am honored by your recognition." The female warrior stepped forward, and her voice carried an authority that made it clear she outranked even Garoth in some capacity. "I am Thane Kestra Ironjaw, voice of the clans. Your words before the battle spoke of matters of mutual interest. Speak now, human. What brings your people to the void?" Marcus had prepared for this moment during the long journey from Nexus Prime, but standing face to face with these formidable warriors, he found himself discarding his carefully planned diplomatic speeches. These people value directness and honesty above all else. "Thane Kestra," he said simply, "we came because we believe you are in trouble, and we think we might be able to help." The young warrior made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been contempt. "Help? From soft council races? We need no help." Garoth silenced the youth with a gesture, but his eyes remained fixed on Marcus. "Explain your words, human. What trouble do you speak of?" Marcus gestured toward the ship's conference room. "Perhaps we could sit and discuss this properly? I have information that might interest you." The Warclan delegation followed them through the corridors of the Endeavor, and Marcus was acutely aware of how they studied everything they saw. Their eyes missed no detail, cataloging weapons positions, structural weaknesses, crew numbers. They were warriors to their core, always thinking tactically. In the conference room, Marcus activated a holographic display showing a star map of the Outer Rim. "Tell me," he said to Thane Kestra, "when did your people last visit their ancestral territories?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Warclan delegation exchanged glances, and Marcus sensed he had touched on something significant. "The ancestral worlds are forbidden," Kestra said finally. "No clan has walked those grounds for 2 generations. "Forbidden by whom?" "By the death that sleeps there," Garoth said quietly. "By the hunger that devours all things." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to your homeworlds?" The young warrior started to speak, but Kestra cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Why do you ask these questions, human? What is your true purpose here?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Because the Galactic Council is preparing to send a fleet to destroy you. They see your raids on the Outer Rim settlements and assume you're savage pirates. But I think you're refugees. And if I'm right, then we need to find out what drove you from your homes before it spreads to the rest of the galaxy." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus could see the calculation in their eyes, the weighing of risks against potential benefits. These were not simple barbarians. They were intelligent beings faced with an impossible situation. Thane Kestra stood and walked to the holographic display, studying the star patterns with obvious familiarity. "You speak of things that are not spoken of outside the clans. Why should we trust you with our secrets?" "Because," Marcus said quietly, "my species knows what it's like to face extinction and survive through pure stubbornness. We know what it's like to be underestimated by more powerful civilizations. And we know what it's like to fight for our homes against impossible odds." Garoth leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight. "Tell us of your world, human. Tell us of your wars." Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of genuine emotion. My species evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We survived ice ages that wiped out most other forms of life. We survived plagues, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts. When we learned to make war, we made it with a thoroughness that horrified us. We built weapons that could destroy our entire world, and we came within minutes of using them. The WarClan warriors listened with growing interest. This was language they understood. But we learned from our mistakes, Marcus continued. We learned that survival sometimes means putting aside old grudges and working together. When we reached the stars and met other species, we chose cooperation over conquest. Not because we were weak, but because we had seen what happens when strength is the only law. Thane Kestra turned from the star display. Pretty words, human. But words do not stop the hunger. What is this hunger you keep mentioning? Captain Mitchell asked. For a long moment, none of the war clans answered. Then, Garoth spoke, his voice heavy with ancient pain. It came from a void between stars. At first, we thought it was just another predator species, something that could be fought with ships and weapons. But it was more than that. More how? It learned, Kestra said. It adapted. Every time we found a way to hurt it, it changed. Every time we developed a new weapon, it found a way to turn that weapon against us. The young warrior finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. It consumed entire worlds, not just the people, but the planets themselves. The rocks, the oceans, even the atmosphere. It left nothing but empty space where once there had been life. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. How long ago did this happen? 67 years, Garoth said. 67 years since the last clan ship escaped the ancestral territories. The timing matched perfectly with the last Galactic Council survey of the Outer Rim. Whatever this threat was, it had emerged right after the civilized galaxy had decided the region wasn't worth monitoring. Where are these territories? Marcus asked. Kestra manipulated the holographic display, highlighting a cluster of systems deep in the unmapped regions of the Outer Rim. Here, the Gold World Cluster. Once it was home to 17 clan worlds and billions of our people. And now it is the domain of the Devourers, she said simply. Nothing that enters that region returns. Captain Mitchell leaned forward. Have you tried to make contact with the Galactic Council about this threat? The look Garoth gave her was filled with bitter amusement. And tell them what? That savage barbarians need help from their superiors? That the mighty war clans were driven from their homes by creatures they cannot describe or understand. The council sends diplomats with pretty words and condescending smiles, Kestra added. They do not send warriors who understand that some threats cannot be reasoned with. Marcus began to understand the true scope of the problem. The war clans were not just refugees. They were the last survivors of a catastrophe that had wiped out an entire civilization. And their pride, the very characteristic that made them formidable warriors, prevented them from seeking help from the civilized galaxy. What if, Marcus said carefully, there was a way to get help without sacrificing your honor? Thane Kestra's eyes narrowed. Speak plainly, human. What if we could convince the council that this threat affects everyone, not just the war clans? What if we could frame this as a galactic security issue rather than a refugee crisis? Garoth made a sound that might have been approval. You think like a warrior, human. Use the enemy's own nature against them. Exactly. But first we need proof. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. The young warrior looked up sharply. You cannot mean to enter the Gold World Cluster. Nothing returns from there. Nothing has returned yet. Marcus corrected. But maybe that's because no one has tried with the right approach. Kestra studied him with calculating eyes. You would risk your ships and your people for strangers? I would risk them to prevent a threat from spreading to my people, Marcus replied honestly. And I would risk them to help allies who have proven their courage in battle. Allies. Garoth repeated the word as if testing its flavor. You consider us allies? I consider you fellow warriors facing an impossible situation with courage and determination, Marcus said. That makes us natural allies. The WarClan delegation was quiet for several minutes, communicating in their own language with rapid gestures and subtle changes in posture. Finally, Kestra turned back to Marcus. If you truly wish to see the threat for yourself, we will guide you. But know this, we will not sacrifice our ships to save yours if the Devourers come. We have lost too much already. Understood, Marcus said. We don't expect you to die for us. We only expect you to show us the truth. The truth, Garoth said grimly. Maybe more terrible than you imagine, human. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But running from it hasn't made it go away. Maybe it's time to try something different. As the WarClan delegation prepared to return to their shuttle, Thane Kestra paused at the airlock. You are either very brave or very foolish, Marcus Chun of the humans. Marcus smiled that unsettling smile that had so disturbed Princess Zalara back on Nexus Prime. I've been told that before, usually right before something interesting happens. After the WarClans had departed, Captain Mitchell turned to Marcus with an expression of mingled admiration and exasperation. Please tell me you have a plan that goes beyond fly into the territory where nothing survives and see what happens. I have the beginning of a plan, Marcus said. But first, we need to send a message back to the Council. They need to know what's really happening out here. And what are we going to tell them? Marcus looked at the star display, where the gold world cluster glowed like a malignant tumor in the darkness of space. We're going to tell them that Princess Zalara was right about one thing. This problem does require overwhelming force, but not to destroy the WarClans, to help them reclaim their homes. You really think she'll listen? She'll listen, Marcus said with conviction he didn't entirely feel. Because when we come back with proof of what's waiting in those dead systems, even she will realize that some threats are too big for any one species to face alone. As the human fleet prepared to follow their new WarClan guides into the unknown regions of the Outer Rim, Marcus found himself thinking about the nature of leadership and the price of pride. The WarClans had fought alone for 67 years, their honor preventing them from seeking the help they desperately needed. But sometimes, he reflected, the most courageous thing a warrior could do was admit they needed allies. Now, if he could just survive long enough to prove that point to both sides, the edge of the Gold World Cluster was marked by a phenomenon that defied every principle of astrophysics Marcus thought he understood. Space itself seemed to shimmer here, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, except the distortion extended in all directions and pulsed with a rhythm that was almost organic. God Almighty, whispered Lieutenant Commander Tanaka from her sensor station. The readings I'm getting, they don't make sense. The joint human WarClan fleet had been traveling together for 3 days, and the atmosphere aboard the Endeavor had grown increasingly tense as they approached their destination. The WarClan ships maintained their distance, following predetermined routes that avoided certain regions of space for reasons their captains refused to explain. Thane Kestra's voice came through the communication system, carrying an edge of ancient fear. This is as far as the fleet goes, human. Beyond this point, you travel alone. Marcus studied the tactical display, where 17 WarClan vessels held position at what appeared to be an arbitrary point in empty space. But the sensor readings told a different story. There was something out there, something that registered on instruments without being visible to the naked eye. Garoth, Marcus said into his communicator, what exactly are we looking at? The boundary, came the reply, where the hunger sleeps. Do not mistake the calm for safety, soft flesh. They know you are here. Captain Mitchell joined Marcus at the forward viewport, her expression grim. Our long-range sensors are picking up distortions throughout the cluster. Whatever those things are, they're everywhere. How many ships entered this region with you during the evacuation? Marcus asked the WarClans. There was a long silence before Kestra answered. 3,000 clan ships. Warriors, civilians, children, elders. 3,000 ships carrying the heart of our civilization. And how many made it out? 47, Garoth said quietly. 47 ships out of 3,000. The numbers hit Marcus like a physical blow. An entire civilization, reduced to the scattered nomadic fleets that now raided the Outer Rim. No wonder they had been reluctant to seek help from the Council. The scale of their loss was almost incomprehensible. "We're going in," Marcus announced to his crew. "All stations, battle readiness. Passive sensors only until we know what we're dealing with." The 4 human ships crossed into the Gold World cluster in tight formation, their shields raised and weapons systems charged but not active. Behind them, the WarClan fleet waited at the boundary like mourners at a gravesite. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The star patterns were normal, the background radiation typical for this region of space. But as they penetrated deeper into the cluster, subtle wrongness began to manifest itself. "Captain," Tanaka reported, her voice uncertain, "I'm reading organic signatures ahead. Multiple contacts, but they're not moving." "Organic how?" Like they're alive but dormant. "Hibernating, maybe?" On the main display, ghostly shapes began to resolve as their sensors penetrated the strange interference. They were vast, easily the size of capital ships, but their configuration was unlike anything in any xenological database. They seemed to flow rather than sail through space, their surfaces rippling with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in slow, hypnotic rhythms. "Are those the Devourers?" Marcus asked through the comm link to the WarClans. "Some of them," Kestra replied. "The hunters sleep when there is no prey. You must not wake them." "How do we avoid waking them?" "Pray to whatever gods your species honors," Garoth said grimly. "And do not use active sensors." The human fleet crept forward through the field of sleeping monstrosities, their passage as silent as death itself. Marcus found himself holding his breath as they navigated between creatures that dwarfed their ships. Up close, the organic nature of the beings was undeniable. They were clearly alive, their surfaces covered in what might have been scales or carapace plates that shifted and adjusted as they moved through space. "How do they survive in vacuum?" Commander Rodriguez whispered. "The same way they devour entire worlds," Marcus replied quietly. "They're not bound by the same physical laws that limit the rest of us." As they traveled deeper into the cluster, the evidence of ancient catastrophe became overwhelming. Debris fields marked the locations of destroyed worlds, but even the wreckage was wrong. Instead of conventional asteroid belts, they found masses of partially digested matter that still showed traces of organic processing. "Jesus Christ," Captain Mitchell breathed. "They actually ate the planets. Not just the biospheres," Tanaka confirmed, her voice sick with disgust. "The geological analysis shows they consumed the planetary cores too. There's nothing left but waste products." They passed the remnants of what had once been a gas giant, now reduced to a cloud of strange, fibrous material that pulsed with its own internal light. Sensor readings suggested the cloud was still somehow alive, a vast digestive system processing the last traces of the planet it had consumed. "How long does it take them to consume a world?" Marcus asked the WarClans. "Days," came Kestra's hollow reply. "They work from the core outward, breaking down matter at the molecular level and incorporating it into their own mass. And they learn from what they consume." "They learn everything," Garoth confirmed. "Knowledge, memories, skills, technology. Everything that once lived on those worlds now lives inside them." The implications were staggering. These creatures weren't just predators. They were archives of every civilization they had encountered. They possessed the accumulated knowledge of countless species, making them effectively immortal repositories of stolen wisdom. "There," Tanaka announced suddenly. "I'm picking up artificial structures ahead. It looks like—" The words died in her throat as the main display resolved the image. Rising from the surface of what had once been the central world of the Gold World cluster was a structure of impossible geometry. It was clearly not built by any known technology, composed of materials that seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy. At its base, massive devourer creatures lay coiled like sleeping dragons, their bodies forming living buttresses for the alien construction. "That's not WarClan architecture," Marcus said with certainty. "No," Kestra replied, her voice filled with ancient rage. "That is what they built from the bones of our homeworld. A nest, a breeding ground, a monument to our extinction." The structure pulsed with malevolent life, and as Marcus watched, he could see smaller shapes moving within its translucent walls. The Devourers were not just consuming civilizations. They were using the remains to build something. "But what?" "We need to get closer," Marcus announced. "Human." Garotha's voice carried a note of urgent warning. "That structure is protected. The moment you approach it, you will wake the Guardians." "How many Guardians?" "More than your 4 ships can handle. More than our entire fleet could handle. That is why we fled, Marcus Chun. Not from cowardice, but from wisdom." Marcus studied the readings, calculating odds and possibilities. The structure was clearly important to the Devourers, which meant it might also be vulnerable. But approaching it would mean certain death for his small fleet. "Unless, Thane Kestra," he said suddenly. "What if we didn't fight them?" "Explain." "You said they learn from what they consume, that they incorporate the knowledge and memories of their prey. What if we offered them something they've never encountered before?" Captain Mitchell looked at him in alarm. "Marcus, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that these creatures have consumed thousands of civilizations, but they've never met humans before. They don't know what we're capable of." "What are you proposing?" Kestra asked. "I'm proposing that we give them a taste of humanity," Marcus said with that unsettling smile. "Not enough to consume us, but enough to make them curious." The silence that followed was profound. Then, Garotha's laughter boomed across the comm channel, filled with genuine amusement. "You are indeed insane, soft flesh. But it is a worthy insanity." Marcus activated his ship's intercom. "All hands, this is Marcus Chun. I'm about to do something that will either save the galaxy or get us all killed in a particularly spectacular fashion. If anyone wants to object, now would be the time." The bridge crew exchanged glances, then Chief Petty Officer Williams spoke for all of them. "Sir, we've followed you this far. We're not stopping now." Marcus nodded and turned back to the comm system. "Garoth, Thane Kestra, I need you to promise me something. Speak. If this goes wrong, if we wake them up and they come after us, don't try to help. Get back to Council Space and tell them everything you've seen here. Make them understand that this threat has to be stopped before it spreads." "And if you succeed?" Kestra asked. "Then we're going to need every ship the galaxy can muster," Marcus replied. "Because what we're looking at here isn't just a species of predators. It's a weapon, something designed to consume entire civilizations and use their knowledge to become stronger." "Who would create such a thing?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." The Endeavor broke formation and began its approach to the alien structure, alone and outnumbered beyond any reasonable calculation. Behind them, the WarClan fleet held position, their crews watching with a mixture of respect and disbelief. As they drew closer to the structure, the Devourers began to stir. Massive forms uncoiled from around the alien building, their bioluminescent patterns shifting from the slow pulse of sleep to the rapid flicker of awakening hunger. "Incoming transmission," Rodriguez announced. "Source unknown. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything